I think that's starting to happen.
With AI?
Yeah.
So we're talking about here real quickly as we get this podcast going today. Welcome to Bending Rules, Pete and Eric, and joined by Chris here, Capdevila, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we're talking about this might be a deep fake, so you'll need to figure,
it is.
You'll need to figure it out in case any of us say something that wasn't intended to be aired. Through the use of our AI tools, we'll be able to kind of fake it till we make it. So you be the judge, but in any event, welcome. I mean, the goal here today is, talk all things entrepreneurial, and that can relate to sort of anything also transpiring around that journey, not just the work part of that journey, right? And so, but before we get into that and introducing Chris and talking a little bit about his background, I just had I had kind of sort of a concept around investing and building companies or whatever that I don't think is discussed enough. And it kind of was preceded by something I sent you guys this week, which is that Freakonomics podcast on failing. And I don't know if you had a chance to listen to this thing on failure, but basically the genesis of it is, if you didn't listen to it, was that we don't really talk enough about failures. Like if you look at someone's past, it's mostly about, they articulate all the things they did well, and then they weave in, but I had this thing that kind of failed too, but that, I learned the most from that. Well, if you learn the most from that, then shouldn't we be talking about failures more versus only our successes? So with that in mind, I was like, I kind of wanted to open this up a little bit about maybe something where the three of us can triangulate before we get sort of into your journey, all aspects of it, like what we've learned from our failures. And here's my big sort of kind of question around it, which was, is there a formula to failing successfully? How about
nice.
Yeah.
How about that for an oxymoron?
Sure.
Because, when I listened to this podcast, one of the things I kept thinking about with the people that are interviewing this podcast and the Freakonomics one was, I was like, well, yeah, of course they're going to fail because they went about it this way. And not to say they wouldn't have failed anyway, but I was sort of evaluating the way that they did their stuff. So let me give you an example. So one of the things on that podcast was this guy came up with this invention for top ramen. Like he's in college or whatever. He's like, man, if we just had a little machine, you could put the ramen through and it automatically would make your ramen. You wouldn't have to boil the water and get a pot, or it's just a machine. It's only for top ramen. It's the most highly consumed meal in the world. Somehow he had the stats on this thing, right? And, the guy sounded like a really pretty intelligent guy, and it didn't work, and I was thinking, okay, well, he said it didn't work. He didn't understand why it didn't work. They went out and I'm like, well, did you ever besides just saying, hey, I've got a good idea, this is a great idea, actually build it with a customer or talk to enough people? I mean, it just seemed like you went after this idea that you thought was so great. And the lack of validation before he made this pretty big investment in building this thing to cook the top ramen stuff. Well, I mean, so is there a way he could have failed better? Or what did you learn from your failures that if you had to go do it again, you wouldn't fail that same way, or maybe even avoid the failures?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm going for.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally, my philosophy on failure, and I don't know how you guys sort of look at it, but you got to expect it, right? Life's all about a series of stepping stones, right? And we fail more than we succeed. You're right. We always talk about the successes, but getting to that success involves a ton of failure, right? And if you go into it expecting that you're going to fail, right, and learn from that and move on, I think there's a lot of ingredients to success. And one of the most important ones is determination, right? And so if you're passionate enough and determined enough and expecting failure through the process, you're not going to get set back by the failure. You're going to look at the failure as, okay, this is just part of it. I just learned something from it. Let's move on. How can we move on from here and get past this failure, right? So I think if you go into it expecting it and realizing that it's just part of the process, you'll likely have a very different experience and a higher chance to ultimately potentially have success if a lot of those other ingredients are present, right? But determination and expecting failure, I think, are pretty key.
Did you cultivate that skill, as a kid in one way or another that set the stage for you being a little bit more prepared for it when it came to a business environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely was part of an entrepreneurial family. So my grandfather had his own company. My mom was always cooking up, with my uncle, business ideas,
Really?
and would get us involved as kids, my brother and I. So I don't know if it was just through that process that and learning, through their failures and seeing them firsthand.
And they were set back, like, when they made mistakes, they go, okay, that's just part of the process. And you were able to watch that.
Yeah, we watched it. They didn't point it out and say, okay, look, we failed here. So it wasn't like a very focused instructional moment, but maybe just through osmosis of kind of experiencing it in the real world, right?
The dinner table factor.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of overhearing them talking. So I don't know if that was part of it or not, but I can imagine, right, that it definitely impacted me in terms of how I look at things.
Just imagine the opposite, around the dinner table and your parents make one mistake and they go, I'm never going to try that
Exactly.
again. And you're not listening, but you're listening. You're 8 years old,
Exactly.
And before you know it, you have that mindset.
Yeah, and then you're scared to do anything or to fail ever, right, which is obviously not realistic, right?
What a cool environment to grow up under.
Yeah, I was. I had cool parents.
This is kind of nature nurture though concept.
Mm-hmm. Are you born with it, or do you learn it?
And I mean, as I'm kind of listening to you guys, I'm thinking, I think that would facilitate your risk taking for sure. Being involved in a family that has sort of that dynamic to it, but I had pretty much the opposite of that. Other than sort of around sports, like hiking up mountains and stuff like that. But everybody else is super conservative, and is almost like afraid to take some risk and make some investments, and they should have in retrospect. Like case in point, I was just talking to my dad about this the other day. My first time he was in Kona was 1968, and he'd been to Maui in the 70s a bunch. He talked about forever about buying something there, and never did, and could have. Like it wasn't like, it would have hurt a little bit, and you would have had to put money away and maybe not done some things, but you could have, but there was no risk taking. There was no the perfect situation didn't set itself up, so they never did anything. So,
well, it was interesting because I had something very similar. So my dad was very risk averse.
Really?
Yes. And my mom was the complete opposite. She was very entrepreneurial and always like looking for the right way. And so as a kid, my brother and I kind of had both. I don't want to say extreme because I don't think they were both in any sort of extreme in that manner, but definitely saw both sides of it. And so I'm curious, like if you had that, just the one, what drove you to take risks? Was it kind of seeing that they weren't taking risks and saying, oh, that's not a good way to live, and kind of wanting to do something different?
Yeah.
You think that
great question, actually. And I think probably ultimately.
See how I just turned it right around?
No, this is what I was hoping for, as we talk about this.
Didn't see that coming.
Exactly.
I'm ready for it. I don't have a shortage of things to say, unfortunately, since I'm told. But but turning that around. Hey, by the way, our guest here, Chris Capdevila. So no formal introduction here. We just said Chris is joining us today, but I want to go into some of your stuff because like where you're from and how you. He's been a tech entrepreneur and had some great outcomes and some challenges or failures along the way too. So there's lots to learn. But I'm happy to answer that question. I think I almost dodged it, didn't I?
Yeah, that was a good deflection there.
What was the question again?
Just buying time.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta think this one through. No, okay, I'll give you.
The question was, what drove you to take on risks?
I think the thing for me, Chris, was like there were kind of two things that sort of come to mind. One was I looked at the people that seem to have the most time and flexibility. Okay, so I have a dad that's a doctor, is an orthopedic, that's kind of driving all day long, working. He gets his time off, but when he's not working, he's not making money. Essentially, is the deal, right? You're not doing surgeries, right? You still have overhead of your office and all that kind of stuff. So only did I formulate that, concept of the aspect of it later, but I just knew he was really busy. Then I looked at the business guys that are friends of the family or whatever, and it's just like, it just seemed like they always had these afternoons off and were what I did know is how hard they were working when they weren't, when
and what it took to get to that
what it took
point
to get there. Maybe they were working at 4 or 5 a.m. that morning, and, so they're able to golf at 2 or whatever they were doing.
You had more flexibility,
but it did look like more fun, and so that sort of resonated with me. I think the other thing too that ultimately you're a product of your options, and I just wasn't that capable enough in school to pursue like an engineering degree or a medical degree or things like that. That sort of these careers that land you in a trajectory where you're in making good money, let's say.
Yeah.
I mean, a lawyer, so I did end up going to get my law degree and that kind of stuff, but I wasn't like at a top law school in the country or anything like that. So, just seeing your sort of trajectory, you're like, well, I get, what's my choice really? Like, and I knew that I would enjoy it. I mean, from a young age, I kind of did some entrepreneurial things. We all had those seeds, right? Lawnmower companies or whatever we were just kind of doing to start stuff.
Paper routes.
But there was
Sundays sucked. Big newspaper.
Yeah. So like, I mean, on your end, how about you? Like what was it that led you into that kind of risk-taking temperament, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think definitely my upbringing, like I was saying, I had both sides of it.
Where'd you grow up?
So I was born in Argentina, down in South America, land of Messi. Actually born in the same city as Messi, for those of you that follow soccer. He's my cousin. No, just kidding.
You find it my venture.
No.
Made it pretty easy.
I wish, but we were both born in the same city in Argentina, so that's a little fact there. And
football player, soccer player?
Yeah, I played growing up. I mean, I think when you're from Argentina, you kind of have to. But I came to the U.S. when I was pretty young, 7 years old, and with my parents and my brother, and didn't know a lick of the language. Sat in class pretty much wondering what people were saying, so it was pretty tough. And so I think that sort of change in my early life also sort of set, a lot of my personality of maybe some grit and determination, right? Had to learn the language and make new friends and figure out a whole new culture. So I think there's a reason why immigrant entrepreneurs, right, have a tendency to seek success and find success. I personally believe there's a lot of ingredients in that experience that sort of lead immigrants to that. And so I had that dimension. And then I think terrible title for a book, but it was a pretty instrumental book that I read early on in my college years. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. Yeah. Terrible title, but really good book. And it impacted me, and I saw kind of like your story, right? I saw a rich dad in my real life, and I saw a poor dad in my real life. And sort of that kind of really just defined the trajectory that I was going to take, right? Again, terrible title, but I would urge everybody to read that book. It's a very good book still today.
Yeah.
Right? And so that kind of drove my path of wanting to have my own business and seek the entrepreneurial path. I didn't go there right out of college. I actually took on a management consulting role with Price Waterhouse. I went to UCLA, and coming out of a business degree at UCLA was either you went to New York or San Francisco in investment banking if you were going to get the high paying jobs, or you went into consulting, right, with one of the big audit firms. And so that's the path I took. And honestly, I learned a ton. It was probably one of the best things I could have done coming out of college, because I didn't really know what the heck I wanted to do.
Anderson?
It was with Price Waterhouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I mean, I was interested in everything. So I was like scatterbrained. But that experience gave me a ton of exposure to different industries, to business challenges from, we want to get out of this specific market. How do we get out of it?
Yeah.
We want to get into this market. Why are we wanting to get into it? So it was just like all the stuff I didn't learn in college, like I got in a very concentrated manner working with companies like GE and Disney, and Nestle. And so it was an amazing experience. I was getting paid a lot of money, working my butt off, traveling pretty much every week. So it was horrible in that regard.
Yeah.
But it was the education that I really needed to business education, right? To then go off on my own. And anyways, that's sort of the
big
summary.
Of progression there.
How long did you run that game with Price Waterhouse before you were sure you were going to run off and do something?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I never planned to stay as long as I did in that, because it's a lot of work and pretty grueling. You're traveling a lot, but I was learning so much, and I was fortunate to get on some really good projects, because in that world, it's all about the projects you get into. Is it some like really bad project at a company that's going under and going bankrupt, or is it a really exciting project? And so I happened to have a lot of luck and get a lot of really nice projects. And so I ended up staying almost 7 years. Yeah. And typically it was like a 2-year cycle. People would get burnt out after 2 years and move on and do something.
Where were you living
different.
at this time?
So I was in Southern California
at
the time. I went to UCLA and lived down in Orange County at the time.
You were kind of in that part of the country in Orange County. Okay.
Were you saving money on the sideline during those 7 years, thinking I need some seed capital to get my business going, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, so it was a great career option. We did pretty well. I mean, we were on per diems when we were traveling, so I saved a ton of that money. Yeah. Salaries were pretty good. And so we were able to buy our first home, right? So it was kind of couldn't be happier, right? Super lucky in that regard. And save some money. But, getting into my first startup, it was self-funded, right? And we took on a second mortgage on our home, right? So now I can get into all of those kinds of things that were super scary, right? But at the time, those were the things that we needed to do to kind of keep things going.
I'm always fascinated in seed capital, on the origin of seed capital for a person's path when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so. I mean, it for me, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it came from just kind of digging into the nest egg, right? And our nest egg was some of the equity investments we had, some cash savings or bonds that we had, and then some equity in our home that we had to tap into, and then not getting paid for years, right? Yeah. So I went from a really nice, comfortable salary with Price Waterhouse to literally
benefits and everything.
Oh yeah, benefits and traveling, business class and sometimes first class, to literally not getting paid a salary for many years, for probably 2 to 3 years.
To pull away from that, to me it seems pretty unique. Because you got this comfortable income, you've got a house now, you're kind of getting established, you got raises coming, it's just going to stack on top of itself, and you're like, but that's not where I want to go. Yeah. And, it seems like it'd be kind of a handcuff situation, if you were just, big time, getting too comfortable with the finance.
Totally. And I think I think many of us potentially have suffered from that, right? Where you get too comfortable and you're like, okay, I'm not really pushing myself. And I think many of us have that personality where we're looking for new challenges and new things. And I certainly have that. I get bored, right? So I need that next challenge. And although someone looking at it from the outside is like, why would you ever do that? You went, because we were having our first child, my daughter. we had just, like about 1 year, 2 years prior, had purchased our home, and it was the biggest, for that, for the deposit that we made, the biggest check I had ever written in my entire life. And then we took on a mortgage, obviously, and then a second mortgage to keep the business going. So it was like super stressful.
So you got all the balls in the air.
Yeah.
And now you're like, I know, I'm going to start a business.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's those things that actually make you have the grit and determination. It's like, I have to succeed at this.
If not now, then when?
Yeah, and I'm all in, right?
Yeah.
Not to use the poker analogy, but yeah, we were all in, and I was all in. I needed that first business to be successful.
That tension, the need to be successful.
Yeah.
But you're hitting on something that I've always thought about too, and that's like to the age of entrepreneurs and like when to start a company, and the opportunity cost as you get older gets so much higher.
Definitely.
Yeah. For just
life gets
people,
more complicated.
Life gets more common. If you do have family, or you bought a house, now you got that hanging over, or you want to travel more, whatever and you want to travel at a higher rate or whatever it is, and pulling away from that is a hard thing to do. Like it was much easier for me to be an entrepreneur when I was like 25, 26, because that's when I started my first company. Because I'm renting a place from a lady that's a little apartment that's my office too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like $200 a month or $220 or whatever. That time it's like, so your burn rate's low and you're just it's pretty easy to take risks. Fast forward, on these kind of scenarios, this is why it's always interesting to me, like how people just they're going to get pulled into their path they're supposed to go. And whether they kind of want to, or, because you're just like, you could probably look forward and say, hey, I got this life of Price Waterhouse. Yeah, I get my incremental thing, but I'm always traveling. I'm like, and for what at the end of the day, but that jump is a big jump, with the opportunity cost.
Yeah. And huge risks. Yeah. And I think you definitely need to be young to experience that for the first time. I think entrepreneurs can obviously continue to be entrepreneurial and starting businesses well into later in life.
Yeah.
But the first one that you do, personally, my personal belief on this, if you're younger without a lot of those, those constraints or anchors, frankly, right?
Yeah.
That would keep you from really taking that jump. I feel like I had some anchors. We had our first child, we had a home, and we still did that. And in my case, we did it because we were fortunate that we had some comfort, right? We had some financial comfort that allowed me to take it, and not really knowing what the heck I was getting myself into either, right? But once we were deep, it's like, oh God, what did I do?
Yeah, now I gotta keep going.
Got to keep going, and and just make it work.
But you must have had a fair amount of conviction around your idea at that time in order to take that big of a jump.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what gave you the conviction around your idea? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your idea, because frankly, as long as I've known you, I don't really know quite what your company did that ultimately, ended up producing and selling or whatever. But. Yeah.
So I definitely had a lot of conviction, and it came directly out of my work at Price Waterhouse. So initial few years at Price Waterhouse, we were doing strategy work, kind of M&A strategy, how to grow the business to exit over the next 3 years. So a lot of strategy work. But then Y2K hit. And I don't know, for the young folks in the audience, Y2K was this kind of crazy thing where all of a sudden, on a stroke of a day, all of the computer systems around the world weren't going to work anymore, right? And so there was this flurry, millions and millions, if not billions of dollars that were spent essentially ripping out those old computer systems that companies were using to run their business and putting in new systems. And so Price Waterhouse participated fully in that. And so my role at Price Waterhouse got completely changed from strategy work to systems implementations and change management around that. And so the long story short is that I went through that whole basically world transition, right, that industries made across the board, and saw an opportunity, right, left behind in the smoke of that craziness. And that was the genesis for my first company.
So what was it that the first company did?
Yeah. So essentially the situation that most companies found themselves in is they were taking these very fine-tuned, very tailored computer systems that they had through the years prior to to Y2K,
Yeah.
and replacing them with these fairly generic packaged systems, right? That were supposed to be appropriate for all kinds of companies. And in reality, they weren't appropriate for any company, and so these companies were now left in, okay, their systems, their new systems were now working after Y2K, but they weren't working very well. They had all kinds of control issues, control gaps all over the place, process automation issues where they had certain processes automated prior with their old systems. And now, because of the kind of the chaos of having to do this by a certain date, a lot of processes that weren't automated. And so the genesis for the company was to actually help that problem, right? With a platform that sat on top of these packages that would enable business people to implement controls and automate processes without needing developers, very expensive developers.
Yeah.
So it was more of a configuration of controls and
kind of a middleware type of a layer. I mean, is that a fair way to sort of
it was
describe
basically a middleware platform that would enable companies to implement better controls, tighter controls, more fine-grained controls, and process automation into these fairly generic packages that they now had in place. And it wasn't easy in the beginning. As like any startup, you're starting out with no customers, no product, no brand, right? So it's like, we have to be crazy to do stuff like that, but we are. And so it was a, slow iterative process of getting our first client and then getting, clients that almost killed us, like Cisco, because of their demands and their expectations.
Like really not profitable clients. But,
exactly.
But good logos.
From a brand perspective, if we can make that customer happy and successful, makes a company, right?
And they know that too. They know
they do.
They know they have that leverage
they do,
on
for
a
sure.
smaller company. That's sort of a typical.
That's right.
A typical thing. I had a customer like early on with one of our early, my first company with trying to get Walmart. And even though we're a technology company providing something to Walmart's legal department, they had the same culture of just like drive this price down, get as much services as you can. I mean, there's no way and demand a lot of our service team proportional to what they really, frankly, kind of needed, but we would do this extra sort of work. But it was Walmart and they could say positive things about us. And, but it wasn't, they're not necessarily sometimes the best customers. So you got, I mean, obviously landing Cisco was big, but that probably wasn't your first. What company was your first company, and why did they go with you, and how did you set up the business relationship? Like, what did that look like? You don't really have anything. So how did you get them to engage in you and then trust you that you're actually going to follow through on this stuff? Because that's a huge step for an entrepreneur, is to try to get beyond like the build it, they will come, and actually, will they pay you a lot of money?
It's a great question. And I think I was pretty fortunate, given the nature of the business that I started and my background as a consultant, that I leveraged that in order to get in with clients more as a consultant that was bringing in products that made us more efficient. And so we had, the likes of Anderson and Price Waterhouse that were coming in with people and no product to make efficiency, because they're charging by the hour, right? And charging a lot by the hour. And so here we come as a no-name young company, but having the experience of being with those companies. And we came in with our bag of products that made us super efficient in terms of doing what we needed to do for those clients. And so we took a consulting-based approach, bringing in what we had at that time, our bag of products, kind of like a plumber would come to your house with their toolkit and just refine it over time, right? Because we were in there dealing with the problems and our products. And so our products were naturally being refined in such a way where we knew exactly what our customers needed to be able to do with them, right? So it was a beautiful model.
Collaboration with the client. Sort of entry on the service point. So some of these clients, was it just you just had a Rolodex from being at Price Waterhouse for all these years, and you're able to kind of reach into that and say, hey, now I can make a call.
Definitely.
And they're going to listen to what I have to say, even if it's just I want to say just a service offering to help them, integrate this system but then, hey, also I got this product for you.
Exactly.
You can bolt on. This is going to make it a lot easier. Is that? I mean, I'm simplifying it.
Yeah,
to a
no,
degree, but
definitely. That was exactly what happened with our first set of customers. And frankly, a lot of them were so tired and exhausted from the process that they had gone through during the Y2K craze.
yeah,
That it was and they knew the pain. They had pain, right? It was like they needed medicine to deal with that pain left behind from that process. And so we happened to be there at the right time, the right place, with the right model for them, much lower rates than what the other consulting firms were charging, with a much more efficient approach that brought product to the table. And frankly, we were leaving behind the product, right? So that was our model, where we would come in with our product and our platform, and we would leave it behind so that, and enable their team in-house to actually maintain it moving forward and manage it and continue to implement controls. So it was a really, from a value proposition perspective, it was something unique that they weren't hearing from a lot of other companies. And so that allowed us to essentially win business. It wasn't easy. I'm painting it easy, but it took a lot of work. And frankly, I think one of the big big wind in our sail that came much later on was through government regulation, Sarbanes-Oxley. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sarbanes-Oxley, but it was an act that Congress passed as a result of a lot of fraud in public companies, where, CFOs and CEOs were cooking the books, right? Or really, I don't know if they were literally cooking the books, but there was just a distrust in financial statements, and that's bad, right, for the whole equities market. Who's going to invest if you can't trust the financial statements that are coming out? And this law basically put in repercussions where CFOs could actually go to jail, CEOs could go to jail. But like with a lot of things, new things that come out, we got all excited because we were in the controls business. We were ensuring financial statements were accurate, right? And so we were like, oh my God, this is going to be great for our business. We're going to become one of those unicorn companies. Every public company is going to need to use us. And like with a lot of new regulation, there was a ton of pushback, right? And it took about 5 to 6 years for the teeth in it to be implemented, right? And so we, as a young company, had to continue to sort of sustain ourselves right through that. And how much do you grow, right, in anticipation of this coming? So it was a really tough time, but ultimately that did provide some wind. It just took 5 years longer than we thought it was going to take, which was frustrating. But
in the meantime, your inception had been this other product that was helping with the Y2K management. But are you saying that market was kind of sunsetting, and you needed to kind of find the Sarbanes-Oxley product to see the growth that you needed to see?
Yeah, I mean, we were doing the same types of things, but companies were starting to get to a point where all of those new systems that they implemented during Y2K were now like, okay, right?
Gotcha. So they had fixed their
problem
either with you
without,
or some
exactly.
other service, and so now
they were sort of like floating above water, right?
Okay,
and
gotcha.
So yeah, our business was sort of stalling a little bit, right? We still had some business, but it wasn't by any means growing, exponentially. And so we thought when Sarbanes-Oxley came out, we got so excited because we thought, okay, this is going to be game changing for our business. Now every public company, at least public companies, are going to have to do this, right? And but like I was saying earlier, it just took way longer than we thought it would to actually get implemented.
There's like so many tangential concepts that are emerging here because, as you sort of lay this out, and I'm just wondering if you can comment on this because it has more to do with like you as now an angel investor looking at companies. And that was like, is this company, because you mentioned this, truly solving a pain point? Like there's a pain in the market.
Yeah.
Like, you see a lot of, this is the other thing I was talking about, these entrepreneurs and the failing, like why I started with that is like, well, are you really addressing a pain point? People talk about this pain point. How do you know that this new entrepreneur, like people, like when budgets are getting cut, are they still going to need this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's one thing that came to mind. The other was that, here you start a business and you're 4 or 5 years in, whatever that number is, and you now need to start another business. Like, it's like, you're not just this whole notion of like, you're being an entrepreneur and you're sort of done.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to see growth, maybe you've capped out, and that's kind of a hard thing to do, right? Again, in the middle of a life cycle of a company.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question in this is, one, on the pain point, I mean, did you luck into that, or did you just sort of instinctually know that has to be present for me to start a business? And how much has that philosophy served you going forward
Mm-hmm.
into other companies you've either run or invested in?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because you end up doing like this founder's pad thing. I want to talk about that too, and but let's hold off to get there. But just tell me about the pain point thing.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in my particular case, it was very evident to me, the pain that was there, because I was living it.
Yeah.
Right. I chose to start a company in something that I had a lot of experience with, and it was my domain expertise. It's what I was focused on, and I saw the pain firsthand. I see a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly in the tech space, get excited about an idea and say, "Oh, I'm going to go fix this problem in healthcare." And they have no clue, right, what the pains and challenges are in healthcare. They're great technicians and they understand software, but they have no understanding of that domain. And they imagine that there's pain because they've read about it or they've heard about it. But living that pain firsthand is very, very different. And so what I normally suggest or advise those entrepreneurs is, if they really want to go do that, go find a domain person that's been living that pain firsthand, bring them on if you can as an operator, because it'll be game changing, right? Yeah. For the trajectory of that business. And I think a lot of companies, startups, fail because they're missing that domain experience, right?
Yeah. It's just sort of the outside entrepreneur having an idea, getting into something they don't know much about.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the top, I don't know, like, or the other thing on there was the paint can. The guys started developing this new paint can, which we can all identify as, they kind of suck, right? They spill and stuff. There's a lot of waste in paint cans, things like that. New paint can. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Like, if you just say it conceptually, like when I heard it, I was like, yeah, why wouldn't that work? We can pour the paint out instead of having whatever you do. But he didn't collaborate with like a painter or a painting company. Like, one painter asked him, like, why you inventing this product? Like, no one wanted it. I mean, no one didn't want it. And so it's gone. Even when and that goes back to my pain point thing, because it wasn't painful enough for him. Like, there was some pain there.
Right.
However, I'm going to challenge that a little bit. I don't know if pain is the only necessary driver. I think the other driver in this sort of concept of, at least as far as tech companies, and I think it applies elsewhere too, but I hate speaking outside of my domain, so I'm just going to stick with that as an application, is if you can make a promise or some sort of product that helps generate more revenue, right? Because the pain is usually like, it's just a workflow, right? I got something going on in my workflow that I do daily that just sucks. Like, the spreadsheet's not working. Of course, I'd rather use Google spreadsheet. I don't know, some simple analogy like that, because it's got this new whiz bang thing. But then there's the other thing, is like, how can I help that company grow? And that, in a way, I guess, is indirectly pain.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
they stalled growth.
They want more revenue. So I don't know, maybe that is a pain point. I'm just kind of talking myself through it, because I try to look at these companies like on, new companies that we might consider investing or doing whatever. And I'm always just thinking about the urgency of like the buyer.
Yeah.
And I've never found urgency in the buyer unless it's very clearly they think it's going to help them generate revenue, or there's some kind of workflow playing. Like, I just hate this every day, because they're willing to tolerate a lot of inefficiency.
No question.
So don't make this assumption just because you're a little bit more efficient that your thing's going to get bought.
Yeah.
Because they're happy to sit on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Isn't that a weird thing? Like, don't you want something, Eric, like more efficient, like if you have it but don't assume just because you think that way, like everybody else does.
All I can think of is I would fail tremendously because I'd be going after efficiency points rather than pain points. revenue points, I get that. I'd be
Mhm.
going after that ideally too, but I'm such a fan for efficiency
Yeah.
that my first failure, if I took off in the direction you guys did, would be in efficiency rather than going
Yeah.
after the pain or revenue.
Yeah. And to your point,
Interesting.
there's a lot of companies that just are naturally able to withstand a lot of inefficiencies and are okay with it. They expect it, right? And you go in as this young entrepreneur saying, well, we've got this new like whiz bang thing that's going to make your team X super efficient. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's not super important to us right now. We
Yeah.
have all these other problems, right? And so, yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs get themselves into trouble and frustrated, frankly, because it is frustrating, right?
Yeah.
You've got a new approach, and
But you were really hitting on pain. Like, I mean, I just know from what was going on in the industry and the Sarbanes-Oxley,
Yeah.
like those are two sort of painful, and they were also scenarios where you had to change, right? Like the regulatory aspect of Sarbanes-Oxley, like
Yeah.
you don't have any choice. So that's also a good, I guess, kind of reference point for
Yeah.
should I pursue this thing or not? And I'm talking more generically for an entrepreneur out there, because like what I always kind of say is like, don't tell me all the reasons this thing's going to work. Tell me all the reasons why it's not going to work.
mm-hmm.
Give me your 10 reasons why this thing's going to blow up. That's what
Yeah.
I'm more interested in.
Yeah.
Because if I'm convinced that you know what those are, then okay, maybe there's something there to to pursue. But it's harder to find those big pain points than meets the eye, I guess. And you found them, so that's awesome.
It is super hard. But I think if you look around at just the things that you experience, right? Whether it's buying a home or buying a car or just the things that we go through in real life, there's pain in all of that.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if you're just open to seeing those things, then they'll naturally kind of come to you. I think the challenge comes in where, okay, there's pain in, I don't know, just an example in the mortgage brokerage industry. I don't even know if there is, but let's say there was. If you're not in that industry and living that pain, and you've just kind of read about an article or you talk to a friend about the pain, you're not internalizing that pain in such a way where you're going to really know how to solve that pain. And so job number one is to really try to find either a co-founder or someone that's going to get really immersed in your business to help you understand how strong is that pain? Is it a pain that mortgage brokers are willing to pay for and willing to spend time fixing, right? Because like we were saying earlier, every industry, every business on earth has all kinds of pain, all kinds of inefficiencies, but the large majority of it, they're not willing to, or at least right now, not willing to dedicate the time to fixing it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And many entrepreneurs think, oh, well, the problem I'm fixing or the efficiency that I'm trying to solve is something that every company should want to fix, right? And the reality is that no.
Yeah, I bet you could spot pain without even trying now. You've done it enough times.
Yeah.
As an example, I grew up hunting and we'd look for deer.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was crazy good at finding these animals. We'd drive right by, he'd point at it, and I still couldn't see it.
Mm.
Well, over time, I got better at it, and then over time, then we'd bring in newbies from, that hadn't hunted, and they couldn't see anything. And I was shocked that it's like there's a gradient to it. And now with your experience of spotting these kind of pain situations, it seems like you could just see it without even trying.
It's definitely a skill that you develop and a perspective that you develop, right? Where you're looking for things like that. I can tell you it could be a curse though. Well, because it's like you don't want to go around seeing pain everywhere,
Well, business pain is
but yeah, it's definitely a perspective that you learn, right? And something that you develop a skill for. And I think new entrepreneurs that are just getting started likely don't have that skill.
Right. Just like when I first started looking for deer.
Right. Exactly.
I could not see.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it was right there.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
I love that analogy, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like in your domain, we all develop this type of expertise. And in some ways it flies like counter of the whole Silicon Valley model, which is like investing in 24-year-olds, because they have all this energy, but maybe it's like they can be coached and manipulated. I don't know. I keep going back to this one article I read, the optimal success of starting a company, when they looked at all these companies and how they led to being successful. At what age was that person? That person was 39. Like that was the optimal age to start a company. You now have had time, you have some experience, you got some energy, but that doesn't fit the profile of these unicorn type investments, which again is one of the things I like about this whole podcast format, because most people aren't going to be unicorns, and they're going to be 0 to 100. And so what point do you really start that? Do you start it when you don't have any experience? You might still succeed based on drive and all that stuff, but you're likely going to make a ton of mistakes, some of which you may or may not be able to recover from. I mean, I can tell you that company I started 25, 26, there are 2-3 reasons why that succeeded. I mean, of course I was driven, my burn rate was low, and my market timing was phenomenally lucky. But it was a poorly run business for 2-3 years. I'm not going to look at myself and say I was this amazing entrepreneur and operator, because I really wasn't. I was like going around making a bunch of mistakes. I mean, but people believed that I was going to follow through on what I was doing. So that was the other thing. And I meant to follow through, and I did. So there was that engagement with the customer that drove it. But man, avoiding those sort of pitfalls, I don't know, it's hard to replace experience in that scenario. And even then, I mean, you and I've talked about it, even then you're going to fail.
Oh yeah, no question.
Subsequent adventures and so forth, and I love this thread, but I also want to kind of finish the story on that company and its outcome. But I do want to know about the all-in thing, because you and I had this conversation the other week. Is it necessary to be all in on all these adventures? So if you can touch on those two things, how that would end up, what was the life cycle of that company, and what did that all-in look like to you during that time frame? Because you've got a kid and all that. Unless you guys want to hit on this more, I just wanted to pivot off that because it's on my mind, but I tend to do that. Sorry.
Well, in my particular case, it was an all-in situation. Financially, we got in deep, we got in slowly. I was feeling financially pretty secure. And then, as a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves, you go deeper and deeper and have to tap into your equity in your home. And now you've got a second mortgage on your home. A couple years of no salary, and your spouse, right, is asking, what the heck are you doing? And
I've got a question for you. You just kind of random on that. Is that segue? Okay, you're working the job and you're starting this business. Did you stay with your job for revenue for a little while, or did you just cut ties and went for it?
No, but I pretty much cut ties. I was that confident and confident in what I thought I needed to do, both from a path perspective, and because I could have easily stayed at Pricewaterhouse on the partner track and been super happy, right, with that.
But then
with
you got
that
one
track.
leg in, and then you're starting a business. You got a leg in,
and you've got to focus. You've got to be all in, right? And I think the fact that I had financially kind of dipped in, and then it was sort of a slippery slope there, that made an all-in situation. I think the immigrant aspect, right, of also has an all-in of my parents sacrificed their entire lives to come here and give my brother and I a better life. And so you have that sort of monkey or weight on your shoulders. And
there's your chip.
That's it. And honestly, I will invest all day long on entrepreneurs that have a chip, right? As long as they're smart, they're determined, and they have that sort of weight chip on their shoulder. Those are the ones that are going to be bulldogging and determined enough to succeed, right? Ultimately, because succeeding, I mean, sure, there are those entrepreneurs that get super lucky, and it's not a ton of work, but those are just so unique. If they even exist, to be honest. Every single journey is full of failures, full of hardship, full of stress and anxiety. And I always say you've got to be a little crazy to be an entrepreneur, because what it takes, if you knew in hindsight what it's going to take, most people wouldn't do it. And so my advice to entrepreneurs is find a pain that you believe in, that you know well enough. Be like Warren Buffett, right? Invest in what you know, because you're actually investing, right? This is an investment that you're making. And be bulldogged about and passionate about what you're looking to fix, because customers will see that, employees will see that, right? Team members that you're looking to recruit. I can't tell you how much time. I mean, recruitment is like a whole other topic and segue that we could go into. How much time in order to get the right people, because that's the other challenge with startups is you never have enough money or enough traction to get the right people on board, right, with you. And so you're always either spending a ton of time like pleading the right people to come on your journey, right, and convincing them that they should jump on with you, or you have people that have a lot of promise but not experience that are willing to come on with you and kind of learn, along with you. And so it's always this, like, you're not going to have the Lakers or right out of the gates. Never. I mean, sometimes if you have worked with a group before and so you see that often, where there's a good team that's worked before and now they go on and start another company. They all know how to work together and they work together well. And from my perspective, that sets you so far ahead from a success perspective. But anyways, the short story on the end of that journey is ultimately it was bootstrapped. So basically self-funded through our own revenue generation for about the first 5 or 6 years, got it to a couple million in revenue. And then when Sarbanes-Oxley came out, other competitors were starting to come out, and well-funded competitors. And so started to get nervous, really nervous of like, okay, do we have enough capital to compete with those well-funded? And we're talking about millions of dollars, right? Tens of millions of dollars in funding that these companies were getting.
So you might lose some of your employees to some of these companies.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they were poaching our employees. They were poaching some of our customers. So it was a scary time. And at that time, Oracle, who was one of the primary vendors that we were selling into, right? We were on top of their platform and selling into their customers, came to us with an acquisition offer. And it was a gut-wrenching decision, but at the time we got so excited of like, finally, Sarbanes-Oxley, the government, CFOs and CEOs are going to go to jail if they don't do this. And so we were super excited. Little did we know that it was going to take 5 years to actually get implemented, right? Through all the lobbying and stuff that happened. But we said no. I said no to Oracle, and it was gut-wrenching because the next day I got a pretty interesting call that basically said, we're going to compete with you.
Did you consider in that situation to counteroffer to their offer, or you went just with a straight no?
It wasn't about the money at that time, although it would have been life-changing at that point for me and for our family. It was more about the journey. We had sacrificed so much.
Still more to do.
Yeah, more to do, and super excited about the macro environment and what that meant for our business.
How old are you at this point, and how many years even at the company at this point?
Yeah, so that was about
when they first came knocking.
That was about 4 years in to the company.
So pretty early.
And I was in my late 20s.
Yeah, so pretty young. So you're like, wait a second, I still have quite a bit of ramp on this. I sweated it out for the first 3, barely making it. Now I sort of see this horizon. Yeah, this is another thing with entrepreneurs. Like, you do get like approached along the way if you have a good idea, and you just have to kind of have this gut thing, like anybody, right? It's just like, time to sell the 12-plex. I don't know. Like, I just put all this work. I think I can get another 5 years out of this. It's going to mark, you know what I mean? Like, you have that same feeling, because with the different things was involved in, we had some approaches along the way. And early on, I was like, unless they do something really egregious, like that I know they're probably not going to do, I just didn't have the revenue to support a number that made sense.
Right.
That was
exactly.
kind of my more motivator, you know, but it sounds like you may have had a number, but you still were like, okay, I got to keep doing this.
Yeah, I got to keep
now,
going in.
So now you find out they're going to compete.
Yeah. Well, and frankly, it was just to kind of step back. It was an investment decision, really. I was young, but it was more of an It's like, I actually think we can do better. I'm excited about the market opportunity finally, right, that we're getting. And we think we can do better. We think we can continue to grow the business and do better. And that was my communication back to them.
Did you have any idea that they might call back the next day and say, okay, now we're going to compete with you?
A little bit, right?
Bit,
but not that they would be so aggressive, right? At going after the market and going after our particular business.
What a crazy moment in a business.
Yeah, and it was, frankly, we lost a lot of our team members because they were like, okay, well, this is going to get super hard, right? So some of our salespeople left. So it was a really tough time. But fortunately, the market dynamics were such that we were able to attract top tier venture capital. And so at that point, I said, okay, if we don't invest beyond our ability.
What year was this, Chris?
Oh, God.
Like the VC.
I want to say it was 2004.
Yep.
So it was good times from a venture capital, kind of just starting to
coming back out of the 01, 02 recession.
Oh my God! Well, we had to. So I started the company in 2000, mid to late 2000. Then we had September 11th. I don't know if you guys remember. In 2001, where there was literally no business going on at all.
And the Nasdaq went from like 5,500 down to 3,000.
Yeah.
That time heavily weighted tech companies, still pretty much, but.
Yeah, and by that time I was still no salary, second mortgage on my home, right? So it was super scary times. But fortunately, we were able to attract top tier venture capital into the company based on the other funding that was going on in our space, the fact that Oracle was getting on, and frankly, we were able to attract a venture capital firm that was not at all nervous about what Oracle was doing, right? They were like, game on. We do this all the time. We'll support you. Let's go.
Right on.
And so that totally changed the dynamic at our company, where now the employees that had stuck with us were, recharged. We were able to attract really top tier talent at that phase in our lives. And then long story short is Oracle came back several years later with a much more strategic approach to what they wanted to do with our business. And
just several years, so 2 or 3 years later.
Exactly. Yeah. And long story short is the business was acquired by them, and still a solid, strong business for them. It's part of the governance, risk, and compliance business now at
And
Oracle.
you stayed on for a little
I stayed on for actually 2 years. Yeah, I enjoyed my time there. It was fun. We expanded internationally in Asia Pacific and in EMEA, European market. And so I was traveling a lot internationally. It was super fun.
And then you landed in Bend around, 07, 08 on that?
Yeah, I want to say like 08, 09 is when we moved out to Bend.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great time to buy a house.
Yeah, it was, it took a lot of courage to invest, because there were for lease signs everywhere, for sale signs everywhere, restaurants were closing down, businesses were closing down. But we knew that this place was pretty special and that it would bounce back. But it took some courage at that time.
Were you coming from LA at the time then?
We were in Orange County.
Orange County, yeah.
Laguna Beach, yeah.
And so Bend was on your radar somehow.
Yeah, it got on our radar. So my wife and I, after I sold the business and left Oracle, we went on a motorcycle trip through Oregon.
Okay.
We took a couple of weeks and just did a motorcycle trip, left the kids with my mom. Thank you, Mom.
Yeah.
And did a motorcycle trip. We had never been to Oregon. And so we discovered it that way. And once we came across the Cascade Mountains and discovered Bend and Sisters, we put it on the short list. Because we were looking for a change of lifestyle. We were into horses, and my daughter was into horses, and that's hard to do in Southern California, where we were living. So,
it's hard to do here.
Yeah, well, it wasn't as hard back then. Now it's become a lot harder. Yeah,
2009, man.
Mm-hmm. Oh, in hindsight, I wish I would have bought up the whole as much as I could have.
Yeah, no, I think we all wish that.
Yeah.
But it's always easy to say, I wish I had done more, but then you got to look at like, okay, well, you did some things right, and you got
Right.
your more outcomes and better outcomes than negative, right, and in a meaningful way. So, gosh, but hindsight, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. So, the one other thing with Oracle I thought was interesting, and then I kind of want to keep. Maybe I had another question for you, but I feel like people overlook this. This is why I'm bringing it up. Just because you weren't acquired the first time by Oracle, I mean, you had a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you know people at the company, and they, I assume that obviously you kept that relationship. And there's kind of this dance that goes on for sometimes 2, 3, 4 years, right, before
Mm-hmm.
you're actually acquired.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like somebody just rides up and says, God, I don't know these guys. They kind of knew you. They knew your product. They knew you as an operator by that point.
Mm-hmm.
They knew your revenue at the time that they tried to buy you. They saw your growth. They were kind of like, well, we got to get it. We got to get this thing while we can, so. I mean, was that important in them coming back? Did you maintain that relationship well? I mean, like, how did that sort of work in that 2 or 3, or did you just go quiet and be a mystery that we're like, God, we better get these guys?
Well, it became a very contentious, competitive situation, right? So yeah, I mean,
so you were taking some customers from them.
Well, it became a situation of like, okay, let's go in the market and compete, and that was scary going after such a large company like that who pretty much own their customers, right?
Yeah.
Every one of their customers has a budget every year of stuff that they just buy from them, right? So it was hard to compete, but we just.
But I'm saying, how did they end up wanting to come back and acquire you?
Yeah. Well, the short story there is that the product that they developed wasn't. Well, first of all, they pre-led the market, right?
Yeah.
So with marketing and sales,
Yeah.
right? Before they had a product.
Like vaporware. Like
Yeah.
we see companies do that. Like,
yeah.
Hey, we're building this thing. It's going to be amazing, but
which stalled out the market.
Dogs,
For the first year, for the first year to 2 years, it stalled out the market because customers were like, okay, well, we'll see. We'll wait to see what they come out with.
It's a playbook.
Yeah.
Like from these big companies, you see that kind of stuff all the time.
So that was tough. Fortunately, we had a nest egg now that allowed us to, withstand that and had a longer runway.
Yeah.
And so we had to be really careful about how quickly we were spending that nest egg.
Yeah.
Because that's the other pressure that you get from venture capital is they invest and they want you to use it, right? They don't want you to put it in a stock equity portfolio or a bond portfolio earning interest, right? They want they want you to grow, use it, right?
Jet fuel.
Yeah, and so it's this fine balance as the CEO and a member of the board of, okay, what level do we invest and what makes sense, right? How do we throttle this engine? So that was always super hard. But yeah, it became a very contentious relationship, competitive, still maintained the relationships, and we would see each other, at industry events and stuff.
Yeah.
But frankly, it just became a situation of just out competing in the market, being closer to, I think we had a very distinct competitive advantage. We were smaller. And so we were very intimately involved with our customers. Our customers loved us. And they were their customers as well, many of them, right? And so their customers would say, you got to go acquire these guys.
So, that's it. I mean, so there's a bit of the pattern recognition that I've talked about before. Those type of companies get acquired, they have that, I don't want to say mystique, but they just have that presence in the market with their customer base. Like,
their customers love them.
People saying things about our company. Pretty soon that they hear it from another vendor, the company that might acquire it, they're like, "What the heck's going on here?"
Yeah.
Like,
how can you have such a great relationship with a vendor? Right?
Yeah. They don't get it because they're these big behemoths and they got a bunch of. They're always listening to all the problems, and really are they saying, "I love you, Oracle"? God, we got to pay these guys. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I love hearing that, and I just think, to the extent that entrepreneurs can just remember to focus on the product or the service or they're manufacturing something, it is all about the customer and
all about the customer.
But you know what a lot of them do right away? They just want to extract so much money from that customer that before building the relationship and having that customer believe in you, who will later pay you even a lot more.
Yeah.
But no, this deal's worth $100,000. Okay, sorry, no, we can't do it. You got to do it for 10. I don't care. If you get that customer and you build loyalty, with that type of customer, because then when the exit comes, guess who they're calling?
Yeah.
They're calling your customers.
They're
not asking you. They're just calling them saying, "What do you think of this thing?"
Yeah.
anybody on your customer list. So they better be like,
Yeah.
that this is a great company, a great product, great service, what an amazing team. You know what I mean? Then the value of your whole thing goes up.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta know.
No question. Yeah.
Aside from solving the problem and great customer service, did you wine and dine them? Did you take them out and have fun, like on an outside of work kind of a feel?
I mean, we got to the point where we were having like our own annual events. You know,
Okay.
our customers asked us to do that. They wanted to get together as a community and share, you know, their experiences and come and do presentations. And so we started the last several years. Once we were a little bit more flush with capital, we were able to do that financially. And so we started bringing our community of customers together, and that was outstanding, right? I mean, the value of that was like 10x what we had to spend to put that together. Yeah, and we just were very, very close with our customers. If we had to get one of them on the phone to provide a reference for us for whatever it was, whether it was a new investor or acquisition or even some employees, you know, executive team members that wanted to speak to some of our customers. And the value of that is worth more than gold.
Yeah.
Take care of your customers.
I love this, and I want to kind of start wrapping this up to be considerate of your time. This is such a, I told you this would go fast, right?
Yeah, it has gone fast.
There's a lot more I want to ask you about your journey. I think we got to Chris Capdevila take part 2 on this one.
Oh, God.
Absolutely.
Because he started this
It
thing
will be a
called
deep fake.
Founders. He started this thing called Founders Pad. It was one of these guys that helped facilitate companies here in Central Oregon to get launched. And then he eventually went back in as a CEO of another company here after taking some time off. And there's a lot of good stories within both those.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not a smooth sailing at times with each of those, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think
it never is.
I think worth talking about. So, you know, I really appreciate your time today. We've come up on our hour, and we want to start closing up. But I am going to ask you one last thing, because I just feel like it's like kind of the takeaway for someone that might stumble across this, and that's like, what are the 2 traits like that you think are important that an entrepreneur should have, or that just served you well, like 2
Mm-hmm.
traits? I mean, whether, I don't know, this customer thing, whether that was the thing, you knew how to listen to customers, like they gave you your kind of secret sauce or superpower. I mean, others may have that same trait, but I'm just saying for you,
Yeah.
what do you think was the thing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ingredients, and luck is without a doubt a key ingredient. You can get everything right and just be unlucky, right?
Yeah.
But I would say if I had to sort of bring it down to like the top 3 ingredients, passion would definitely be right up there. Determination, right? And they kind of go together, because if you're passionate, you're going to just automatically be determined.
Yeah.
And to some extent having an all-in attitude, right? Where you've got to make this work, and you're going to fail a ton, kind of bringing it back full circle to where we started. Yeah. Going in with the expectation of this is going to be hard. I'm going to fail a ton. I'm going to learn from those failures, but I'm going to get past them. Yeah. And, you know, build a great team around you, because it's never about just one individual, right?
Yeah.
And bring people that are better than you at doing all the things that you need to do, right? As a founder, you start doing everything, even to the point where you're cleaning the bathroom if you have an office, or, you know, I had a little aquarium. My wife would always say, well, what the heck do you have an aquarium for? You're constantly cleaning the aquarium. Get to work. And I'm like, well, the aquarium gives me peace.
Just sit here every day. Just grind through this.
And so eventually you're able to hire someone to come and clean the aquarium, right? So it's kind of a stepping stone. But yeah, if you have passion, determination, and just an all-in attitude to make it successful and do the things that are going to be required to be successful, which are bringing the best team you possibly can at every stage along the way, then I think your chances of being successful go up dramatically.
I have one last question too, and I hate to kind of top it on top of it. I'm circling back to something I was thinking about earlier. What was your mom thinking when you got that first offer from Oracle? Did you talk to her about it?
I did. I mean, and my wife and I obviously had a lot of discussions about it, because it could have stopped all the pain and suffering at that point, right?
This immigrant into the
yeah.
You're the kid, now you got this chance, you know.
My mom really was supportive and trusted trusted me, in making the right decision. She recognized that it was a very difficult decision. But she said, if you believe in what you're doing and you feel that it's the right timing and the right opportunity, then go do it. Continue what you've been sacrificing, these prior years, and go get it.
Your mom's a gangster.
She's gonna love that.
Steady under pressure.
Good gangster.
Good gangster.
Like badass.
From the Argentinian mafia.
Oh, that's funny stuff, man. Well, again, thanks, Chris, for hanging out with us today and having this cup of coffee. We appreciate it. I look forward to doing this again. I honestly do, because I think you got a lot more behind that story. And I mean, we glossed over some stuff that is so important. And like you mentioning people and bringing on people, and I think we could go down that.
Oh yeah.
And that how important that is to someone's success. And we always look at the entrepreneur, but then where does that sort of cascade beyond that? And I think that's one of your, not knowing you that well, I bet you that's one of your superpowers, is getting the right people to join, because, that's something I would look for in an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to assess a company, it's like, how effective is this person going to be at that? And so anyways, I'd love to hear more stories just in that, but hey man, good rapping.
Thank you guys.
Let's do this
super
again,
fun.
And,
Great story.
for everybody else, we'll catch you the next time.
Deep fake out.